So now I'm going to use the tail to sew closed these holes at the corners of the mouth. I've got my tail on my needle, and now I'm just going to sew these holes closed. So now I'm going to move my needle over to the other side so that I can sew the hole closed on the other side. So I'm just going to pull my needle through to the corner of the mouth. I'm going to push it through this corner here, and I'm going to pull it out the other side. And now I'm just going to sew closed this hole on the other side of the cheek. Okay, now I have finished sewing closed this hole, so I am actually going to use that tail to make some stitches along these loops that I left from the previous row where I was stitching here. And I'm going to extend the length of the upper jaw. Now, if the tail that you cut isn't long enough to do this, then you can just use a new strand of yarn and pull up a loop at these white stitches here. I'm actually going to put my hook in under the blue loop and the white loop. This is the blue loop that I worked these stitches onto when I was doing this row. So I'm going to put my hook into both of those loops here so that the piece will be a little more secure, and also to cover up some of those blue stitches so that less of the blue will show through to the outside. So I'm going to pull up a loop and chain one. And now I'm going to go into the next set of loops. I'm going to go into that blue loop and that white loop, pull up a loop and single crochet. And now I'm going to go into the next one and do the same thing, go into the blue loop and the white loop, pull up a loop and single crochet. And I'm going to continue to single crochet in all of these loops until I get to the other side of the mouth. Okay, I've gotten to the end of the row, so I'm going to slip stitch to the corner of the mouth here. So I'm going to slip stitch, and now I'm going to chain one and do another row. So I'm going to turn the work around, and I'm going to single crochet into those stitches that I just built off of the front of the face. And I'm going to continue to single crochet until I get to the other side of the mouth. So I've gotten once again to the end of my row, and I'm going to do my last single crochet. And now, just like I did on the other side, I'm going to slip stitch to that corner of the mouth. And now I'm going to chain up, turn the work around, and I'm going to do another row. Now I've gotten to a place where my tail has run out. I've pulled up a loop for my next stitch, and I'm just going to finish that stitch with a new strand. And you can do that if you cut a short tail, but also you could just use a new strand to start this whole section, but I'm just going to change to a new strand and then continue to single crochet. So I have gotten to the last couple stitches of my row, and I'm going to do a decrease before I end this part. So I'm going to pull up 2 loops and then crochet them together. And then I'm going to do a slip stitch to end this part. And now I'm going to just cut off my yarn. And then I'm going to use my tail to sew closed the corners of the mouth. I'm going to sew together the corner at the bottom part of the jaw and the top part of the jaw so that they come together a little bit better. So I'm just going to do a couple of stitches through this corner of the mouth, and then I'm going to do a few more through the corner of the other side. Okay, and now I'm going to move my tail to the other side of the mouth. If the tail that you cut is too short for this, then you can just sew in this tail and then start with another strand of yarn on the other side. But I'm just going to use my other tail, even though it's a little bit short. And to do that, I'm just going to insert my needle through and then thread it after it's inserted. And then I'm just going to pull through again. And now I'm just going to sew in this tiny tail. Next, I'm going to make the tooth. I'm going to use my white yarn, and I'm going to flip up the upper lip that I just made. And I'm going to use these blue loops that I left at the outside of the work to make my tooth. So I'm going to insert my hook into one of the loops that is on one side of the nose. I'm going to pull up a loop. And now I'm going to chain 1. And now I'm going to single crochet into the next blue loop. So I'm going to go into that next loop, pull up a loop, and single crochet. I'm going to go into the next one and single crochet again. And I want to have a total of 6 stitches. That first chain that I made is going to count as my first stitch. So I have 3 already, and now I'm going to do 3 more. So you just want to put the tooth in a spot where you have 6 stitches in the middle of the front of the face. Okay, so this is my last single crochet. So I have 6 stitches in total for my first row. So I'm going to chain up, and I'm going to do another row. So I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch, and I'm going to go on single crocheting across this row until I get to the opposite side, and I'll have 6 stitches in total again. Alright, I've come to the end of my row once again, and now I'm going to do 3 more rows of single crochet. So I'm going to chain up, and I'm going to do 3 more rows so that I have a total of 5 rows. So I've gotten to the end of 5 rows, and I'm going to do 5 more to make this part double the length, and then I'm going to fold it down, and then I'm going to do a row around all of the sides to join those two together. So I want to do that so that it will be a little bit less, so that it won't bend as much or curl. So I'm going to do 5 more rows so that I can fold my work in half. So I've gotten to the end of my 5 more rows. Now I have 10 rows in total. And now I'm going to fold this piece so that I can do a row around it. I'm not going to fold it toward the front. I'm going to fold it toward the back so that there will be a clean line there. If I fold it to the front, then that won't be attached, and then I would have to sew it on. So I'm going to fold it toward the back, and then I'm going to turn the work slightly so that I can see where I started my row. And now I'm going to go into that stitch where I started my row, or the stitch next to where I started my row. So I'm going to pull up a loop in that stitch and do a slip stitch to join the bottom of my tooth to the top. And then I'm going to go into that first stitch that I made, and I'm going to do another slip stitch. So I'm going to pull up a loop through that stitch and do another slip stitch. And now I'm going to single crochet along the side of the tooth until I get up to the top. So I'm going to go into those stitches that I made on the side and single crochet. And now that I'm at the corner, I'm going to go back into the same spot that I just made my single crochet, and I'm going to do another one just so that there can be a corner here. And now I'm going to single crochet along the tops of the stitches that I made that are folded across in the middle. Now I'm going to continue until I get to that next corner where I'm going to do another increase so that I can have another corner. So I'm going to go back into that same spot and do another stitch. And now I'm going to turn the work slightly, and I'm going to single crochet down the opposite side from where I started. And then when I get to the bottom, I'm going to do another slip stitch into the bottom corner, and then another slip stitch into this blue stitch next to where I ended my first row. So I'm going to single crochet until I get to that bottom area. Okay, I've done my last stitch of this side of the row, and now I'm going to slip stitch into that bottom stitch. And now I'm going to slip stitch into that blue loop next to where I ended my first row. And now I'm just going to cut off my yarn and pull down the lip. Next, I'm going to make the hands now that I've finished with the mouth. So to do that, I'm going to use my brown yarn. I'm going to pull up a loop on the side of the hand here. I'm going to go slightly below the very end. I'm going to pull up a loop and chain 1. And now I'm going to chain 3 more. Okay, and now in the third chain from the hook, I'm going to do a slip stitch. And now I'm going to do a slip stitch into the next stitch. So I'm going to pull up another loop and slip stitch again into the next chain. And then I'm going to go into that space where I first started, where I first pulled up my loop. I'm going to pull up another loop, and then I'm going to do one more slip stitch. Okay, now that's the first finger. To do the next one, I'm going to go up to the corner of the hand and pull up another loop and slip stitch. And now I'm going to chain 3 more again. And now in my third chain from the hook, once again, pull up a loop and slip stitch. Into the next chain, I'm going to slip stitch again. And then into that last spot where I first pulled up my loop for this finger, I'm going to do another slip stitch. Now I have 2 of my fingers done. I'm going to do the same thing 2 more times to finish the last 2 fingers. So into the opposite corner, I'm going to pull up another loop and slip stitch. And then chain 3 more to do the next finger. Then I'm going to slip stitch into that third chain, slip stitch into the next chain, and then slip stitch to the end where I first pulled up my loop for this finger. And now I need to do 1 more finger, so I'm going to go slightly below where I chained up for that stitch. And I'm going to pull up another loop. And slip stitch. And now I'm going to chain 3 more. And once again, into that third chain, I'm going to do a slip stitch. Into the next chain, I'm going to do another slip stitch. And then into the bottom, I'm going to do 1 more slip stitch. And now that's going to be all of my fingers. So to finish, I'm going to go slightly below where I did my last finger so that it's about even with where I first started with my first finger. And I'm going to do another slip stitch. And that's going to finish all of my fingers. So now I'm just going to cut off my yarn. And then I'm just going to do the same thing on the opposite hand to do all of the fingers on the other side. So as you can see, I've finished with making the hands, and now I'm going to show you how to make the feet. So as you can see, I've already made one here, and I'm going to show you how to make the other one. So I have my white yarn. I'm going to start with a magic circle. I'm going to wrap my yarn around my fingers twice. And I'm going to pull up a loop through the middle of those 2 loops that I wrapped around my fingers and chain 1. And then I'm going to chain 1 more, and now I'm going to single crochet 5 more times into those loops. Okay, now I'm going to close my magic circle, so I'm going to pull on the tail a little bit, Then I'm going to find the smaller of the two loops, and the smaller one I'm going to pull from the side closest to the tail. So I'm going to pull on that side until the other loop closes completely. And now I'm going to pull on the tail until this loop closes. Okay, and now I have my magic circle, so I'm going to do a second row. I'm going to go into that first stitch that I made, and I'm going to pull up a loop and single crochet. And then once again, I'm going to use a bobby pin to mark that as the first stitch of my row. And now in this row, I'm going to increase every stitch. So I'm going to go back into that same stitch and do an increase. So single crochet again into the same stitch. And now I'm going to increase every other stitch of the row. So I'm going to go into the next stitch and do 2 single crochets. And I'm going to continue to increase every stitch until I get back to my stitch marker. Okay, I've gotten back to my stitch marker, so I'm going to remove my stitch marker and do the first stitch of my row. And then I'm going to put my stitch marker back. And in this next row, I'm going to increase every second stitch. So I'm going to go into the next stitch 2 times. So single crochet once, back into the same stitch, single crochet again. Okay, and now I'm going to continue to increase every second stitch until I get back to my stitch marker. So I've gotten back to my stitch marker, and now I'm going to remove it and do the first stitch of my next row. And put my stitch marker back. And now I'm going to continue for another 5 rows without adding any more increases. So I'm just going to increase the length of my piece. So I have gotten to the end of 5 more rows. And now I'm just going to slip stitch to the first stitch of my row and cut off my yarn. And I'm going to cut off a long enough tail that I can sew this piece onto the body when I'm finished. So now, as you can see, I've finished stuffing this one leg. I'm going to show you how I did that. If you look underneath the fiber fill, I have a little bit of split peas in there. You can use any kind of slightly heavier stuffing material that you want. Now, first I'm going to pull apart my fiber fill so that it's a little bit more flat and thin. And I'm going to do that so that I can layer the fiber fill onto the inside of the leg. So I'm going to take the leg and I'm going to put the fiber fill into it and flatten that bottom of the fiber fill onto the bottom of the leg. And I'm going to leave a lot of the fiber fill on the outside for now. And then I'm going to fill that space with some of my split peas. Now you can use any kind of like beans or anything like that. I'm using split peas because that's what I had. And I'm using this fiber fill to keep the yellow of the split peas from showing on the other side of the work. But if you wanted to just use some kind of white beans or something like that, then you wouldn't have to necessarily put the fiber fill in the piece. But that's what I'm going to do because I'm using yellow split peas. So I'm going to push the split piece into the bottom of the foot. And then I'm going to fold in the rest of the fiber fill over the top of it so that the split piece don't come loose while I'm sewing the leg onto the body. So now both of my legs are stuffed and they're slightly heavier than they would have been if I had just used fiber fill. So now I'm going to sew the legs on. First, I'm going to line them up with the body. And then I'm going to take one of those legs and I'm going to position the tail so that it's facing the back of the work. And I'm going to position that one leg onto the body. And then I'm going to hold the leg to the body. And I'm going to stitch the leg on while I'm holding the leg in place. So as you can see, I've sewn on both of the legs, and now the only thing that remains before the piece is done is to put the buttons on the front of the body, right around here. So I've already made 2 of the buttons. I'm going to show you how to make the third one. So I have a scrap of black yarn, because you're not going to need very much yarn to make the button. Once again, I'm going to start with a magic circle. So I'm going to wrap my yarn around my fingers twice. I'm going to insert my hook into the middle of those loops and pull up a loop, and then I'm going to chain 2. So now I'm going to do a set of joined double crochets. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. I'm going to actually yarn over and do a double crochet, and then I'm going to leave it open, and I'm going to do 7 of these. So this one's going to count as my first stitch. So I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop to do my next one, and pull through 2 like I would a regular double crochet, but then I'm going to leave it open, and then I'm going to do another double crochet with these 2 stitches still left open on my hook. So I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and once again leave that stitch open, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through 2, leave it open, and I'm going to do that until I have a total of 7 loops on my hook. So I'm going to do one more, pull through 2, okay, and now I have a total of 7 stitches on my hook. So now I'm going to pull a loop through all 7 of those stitches. Okay, now I have my 7 stitches done, and now I'm going to chain 3 more. And now I'm going to do a slip stitch onto that loop, that magic circle, and then I'm going to cut off my yarn. I'm going to pull through that yarn, and now I'm going to close my magic circle. So here are my 2 loops and my tail. I'm going to pull a little bit on the tail, and now I have one small loop and one big loop once again, and now I'm going to pull on the small loop from the side closest to the tail until the bigger loop closes completely. And then I'm going to pull on the tail until the other loop closes completely. And now the button is complete. So now I am going to sew on all of the buttons. As you can see, I've already sewn one on. So I'm going to sew another one to the bottom and another one to the top. And I have my tail threaded on my needle already. So now I'm just going to go into about the spot where the button is going to go, and I'm going to sew that button to that spot on the body. As you can see, I've sewn on all of the buttons to the front of the body, and now the doll is complete. So, if you guys have any comments or questions, then you can leave them in the comment box down below, or you can get in touch with me on Tumblr or Facebook. And I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you'd like to see more tutorials like this in the future, then you can subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!